All right, it is 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the 17th of March. So we are going to start our future Melbourne Committee meeting number 24. I welcome councillors, management and members of the public who are attending tonight's meeting, both in person and to the thousands of you who I'm sure are tuning in virtually. We are meeting on the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, and I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we govern, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin, and pay respect to their elders past and present. We acknowledge and honour the unbroken spiritual, cultural and political connection they have maintained at this unique place for more than 2,000 generations. This meeting is being streamed live and the recording will be published on Council's website by close of business tomorrow. The unconfirmed minutes of this meeting will also be available from the Council's website as soon as practicable. I request that all mobile phones be turned off or to silent for the duration of the meeting. We begin this evening with a condolence motion for Teague Izzard. And I begin with the sad news from our hospitality and culinary community. We're deeply saddened by the passing of one of Melbourne's most celebrated chefs, Farley Teague Izzard. Teague was a visionary whose creativity transformed the way this city dined. Through iconic venues such as Guernica, Izzard at Adelphi and Ginger Boy, he set new benchmarks for Australian hospitality and inspired a generation of chefs. He stood at the forefront of a remarkable period in Melbourne's history, the 1990s and early 2000s, when our great city began to emerge as a global culinary capital. Teague was instrumental in shaping that transformation, helping to define the spirit of cool Melbourne and cementing our reputation as a world-class cultural and dining destination. In recent years, Teague faced the immense challenge of multiple system atrophy. He faced his illness with courage and openness, raising awareness of this rare and debilitating condition. We extend our sincere condolences to his wife Tina, his family, his friends, and the wider hospitality community. Melbourne has lost a great Melburnian. His legacy will endure. Moving on to agenda item 2, disclosure of conflicts of interest. If any councillor has either a general or material conflict of interest in relation to a matter to be considered by committee, please disclose that interest prior to consideration of the item. Agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. I call on a councillor to move a motion adopting the minutes of open meeting number 23 held on Tuesday the 3rd of March 2026. Thank you, Councillor Dr. Ball. Looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Camillo. All those in favour of us adopting those minutes, raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. Moving on to agenda item 4, matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting. I ask councillors whether there are any matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting that anybody wants to call out. No, in that case we move on to submissions and correspondence. The following submissions have been received in accordance with the Council's governance rules. In relation to agenda item 6.1, ministerial planning referral for Lorimer Street, there's a request to speak and an item of correspondence from Joseph Indomenico from Tract Consultants. In relation to agenda item 6.2, planning permit application for Dudley Street, West Melbourne, we have a request to speak from Shem Curry from Contour Consultants. In relation to agenda item 6.4, draft community engagement policy, we have requests to speak and items of correspondence from B. McNicholas and Dr. Stan Capp. And we have an item of correspondence from David Willis as well. In relation to agenda item 6.7, opportunity for international engagement, DLM Campbell, Tokyo Leaders Summit. We have a request to speak and an item of correspondence from Honorary Councillor Chris Thrum. Can I check that anybody who wished to be heard on any agenda items this evening had their name read out as I went through that list of submissions and correspondence? Good. In that case, we will move on, and I remind people that you are invited to address the committee at the time of the relevant agenda item. We now move on to agenda item 5, public questions. For many, their favourite part of this meeting. A 15-minute period will be provided at the beginning and end of this meeting for members of the public to ask questions. Members of the public may either submit public questions in writing or register to ask a question in person or live via an audio link. Questions should not be greater than 90 seconds in duration, and I remind people this is not the time to make submissions on agenda items that are before us this evening. You do that later on in the meeting when the item's being considered. As at 10 a.m. today, there have been 7 written public questions received, 4 of which will be asked in person, and I note that in reading out these questions, we are not attesting to the veracity or factual nature of the statements made. So, let's get into it. I now invite Joe Rocker to ask his question, and I believe Joe is joining us via Zoom. There you are, Joe. We can see you on the big screen here at Town Hall. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can.
Joe,
I can see and hear you, yes.
Ask your question, please.
Okay, my question is, can we make Lygon Street a culturally significant heritage-listed precinct? That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joe, for that question. I'm going to refer this one to Councillor Kevin Louie.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Joe, for your question. I've got a response prepared by one of our directors, Lauren Bialkova, which reads, Council's recently endorsed heritage strategy includes a priority to create powerful experiences of our multicultural city, including the unique identity of Lygon Street. Whilst Lygon Street remains best known as the heart of Melbourne's Little Italy, it has always included businesses from non-Italian backgrounds, and the traders community is famous for warmly welcoming visitors from all over the world. Melbourne's Italian Festa and Expo is now held at the Royal Exhibition Buildings and is supported by the city through the Events Partnership Program. Whilst we believe interest in re-establishing an event on Lygon Street exists, this would be at the discretion of external stakeholders to initiate. The City of Melbourne is committed to attracting and supporting businesses to establish themselves and thrive within the municipality, including Lygon Street, and we will be working on an activation program in the coming months which can consider the matter of the Italian flag. So that's the end of the response I have, and thank you very much, Joe, for your question.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Louie, and I might just add that not a week goes by when members of the Italian community aren't asking us what more can be done to make Lygon Street Italian again. I believe there's even caps that have been made that are somewhat worryingly red in their an appearance that would be well known to many, I suspect. But yeah, there's even been caps made, and of course Joe, Carlo and Andrew from the Sushi Mango guys and many others along Lygon Street, including the broader community, I know are very, very enthusiastic about us doing as much as we can to invest in our wonderful Italian heritage and that connection to Lygon Street. All right, I now invite Ben Herbert to ask a question. Thanks for joining us here at Town Hall. Ben, please make your way to the lectern.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Ben Herbert. I recently started a petition and website to stop Kensington trucks. Now, I'm speaking tonight not on behalf of a residents' association or a business group, but simply as a local resident who cares deeply about the future of our community and the area we call home. Over the past 4 months, Kensington Village has effectively become a freight corridor, providing toll-free access to the Port of Melbourne, the rail yards in West Melbourne. During this time, heavy vehicle traffic has increased significantly, particularly semi-trailers carrying 10 and 20-foot containers, along with garbage, wheat and cement trucks. Much of this change has followed the closure of Moore Street and Footscray as a no truck zone, redirecting freight vehicles onto Epsom Road, Kensington Road and Macaulay Roads to access Dinan Road, the Port Precincts and North Melbourne wheat silos. Yesterday I sent a letter to councillors along with a petition signed by more than 1,000 residents. I also included maps showing how freight traffic is now moving through the western suburbs and several potential solutions for our area. These include options such as introducing a no truck zone on Kensington Road or installing protected bike lanes at Epsom, Kensington and Macaulay intersection to reduce turning space for large vehicles while supporting safe and more active transport. Nick, I understand you visited the area during peak hour last week and saw the congestion and dangerous driving behaviour for yourself. My question is simple. Which members of council are willing to support this letter and help table it at a FMC or council meeting? Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. In my capacity as infrastructure portfolio lead, I will provide a response to that question, and I note Rick Kwasik, who is our GM of infrastructure, here as well, and if you want to add anything to my remarks, please feel free. But let me begin, Ben, by saying that we will be officially receiving your petition later on in the meeting this evening, and thank you for the trouble that you've gone to organising that. That is good civic work that you're doing there. Truck movement, and I'm going to now read some remarks which are in part informed by some of the work being done here by the officers at the city. So I can report to you that truck movement patterns have definitely changed following the opening of the Westgate Tunnel and the introduction of truck bans in Melbourne's inner west. We have raised these concerns with the Department of Transport and Planning, Freight Victoria and the National Heavy Vehicle Regulators. We have shared the concerns of residents that there is a believed increase in the use of Kensington Road and Epsom Road to access the Princess Highway by trucks. Through the Transport Amenity Program, known as the TAP, we are continuing to work with DTP to monitor traffic conditions. We have also contacted Freight Victoria and the National Heavy Vehicle Regulators to encourage truck users to use alternative routes and consider enforcement of those routes. As agreed prior to the opening of the Westgate Tunnel with the DTP, we have been monitoring road usage. In February 2026, we collected vehicle movements at the intersection of Kensington Road and Epsom Road. The data showed an increase in traffic volume on those streets of approximately 20% compared to June 2025. This data did not distinguish trucks versus cars, and so a more detailed count is being undertaken next week, with a further count being planned by DTP after the school holidays that are upcoming. These are part of the planned monitoring. We have been working with DTP to explore solutions to the truck movements, which include a signage strategy to help redirect heavy vehicles away from local streets, assessing opportunities to introduce truck curfews along Kensington and Epsom roads, exploring infrastructure changes that would help deter heavy vehicles from using key local routes and intersections, keeping trucks on those major arterial roads and not being able to effectively rat run through the inner city suburbs which we all live in together. Additional traffic counts are expected to be completed by the end of March 2026. Once these investigations are finalised, we will be able to provide the community with clearer updates and next steps. We appreciate your patience and understanding as this important work progresses. As per the transport strategy, safety remains a high priority for the City of Melbourne, and we will continue to advocate with DTP, Freight Victoria and National Heavy Vehicle Regulators to keep the roads of Kensington safe. Ben, can I report to you that sadly, this is not just an issue in Kensington. It's also an issue in West Melbourne. It's an issue in North Melbourne. It's an issue in Carlton. It's an issue in Parkville. Like across the board, we are having residents reporting increased truck movements in these east-west journeys now across the inner city. And not just your regular trucks or vehicles that do deliveries to local stores. These are big trucks we're talking about, and it's a situation which is not acceptable to inner city communities, and it's not acceptable to me as mayor, and it's certainly not acceptable to councillors here. So I know the Carlton Residents Association is very active on this front. I know that in Kensington and West Melbourne, there is a lot of activity occurring here. So I guess what I'm saying to you is that at a local level, there is a lot of energy and focus on this. I'd ask you to stay active on this issue, Ben. Keep council's feet to the fire on this. Let's keep the focus on DTP as well, and let's ensure that we do everything we can to stop these truck movements in places where they shouldn't be, and we protect the livability of our area, which we are so famous for. So thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate your support in tabling and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you. All right, our next question is from Chris Thrum. Chris, invite you up to the lectern, and great to see you here at our FMC meeting this evening.
Good to see you, Nick. Got a photo that I had put up. Oh, there it is. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Lord Mayor Nick Rees, councillors, members of the public, viewers, listeners. Back in the day, Nicholas Francis Gilly was often wont to say that we rely on data and statistics and evidence to pursue our policies. So we're talking about the public housing towers. We're talking about the fact that there's no real data that's been presented by the state government in regards to public housing towers to support their argument that they need to be demolished. However, on the 30th of January, 2026, an RMIT report called Barclay Street Public Housing Estate Future Visions has found, this is a detailed report from RMIT, found that demolishing the towers built there on the picture of Barclay Street in the 1970s for elderly singles and couples would carry extremely high environmental costs and risk disrupting established communities. The team at RMIT found that the better option here would be to protect the public housing towers, to renovate, renew, to refurbish. They factored into the importance of not disrupting the established communities there. I've let the viewers and listeners know that I've sent the Lord Mayor and councillors a link to that RMIT report. So the question is, can the City of Melbourne Lord Mayor, councillors and management team read and comprehend the report from RMIT and align itself with the City of Yarra and reject the narrative that we need to demolish these towers? They should be protected.
All right, thank you for that question, Chris. I'm going to refer this one to Councillor David Griffiths, who leads our environment portfolio, who can come at this from a retrofit perspective.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Chris, for that question. And yes, perhaps just to clarify for people who are listening, it fits within the environment portfolio probably best. It obviously covers across a few different portfolios, but with the Metrofit Melbourne plan being a key component of the environment portfolio. So first of all, thank you not only for this, but your ongoing advocacy around these issues, and especially for the information you've provided, noting that you have sent through that additional links to the report itself. And I'll have a read of that, and I'm sure the team will have a read of that as well. I did have a quick look at RMIT's website this afternoon,
and to have a look at their sort of press release on this and get a bit of an idea about their report on Barclay Street, and noting that while that's specific to that site, that there are obviously learnings that can come from that more broadly, and that'll certainly be something that we have a look at Portfolio in a more full sense. As I know, Chris, you've been here throughout the discussions we've had about the Retrofit Melbourne plan, and you've seen the emphasis that we've put on the importance of refitting buildings wherever that's possible, and that's sort of a first port of call, that where that's feasible, emissions reduction, minimising waste and displacement, all of those sort of things are very much in our thoughts when we go through that Retrofit Melbourne plan, when we're looking at the kind of buildings that might be within the City of Melbourne. We haven't formed a position at the moment on the public housing towers, demolitions and refurbishments, rebuildings, so we haven't got to that stage yet. But I know with some of the other hats that I wear that we're obviously very much cognizant of the needs of the residents in those towers, that we've had our officers going out and working with them to do whatever we can do as a council to ensure their well-being, and that they have as little disruption as possible to their lives. I've gone out recently and met with some of the residents in Kensington around that, and so both the residents and the processes around the buildings are very much in our thoughts, and it's great that you've brought this to us tonight to highlight and to make sure that conversation continues, and I'm sure we'll do that in our forthcoming portfolio meetings.
Thanks. A quick follow-up question.
Sure.
Could you loop in Rick Kwasek into this as well?
Yep, I'm sure Rick will be only too pleased to be part of that conversation. Good call.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chris. Now, look, we're right on time for questions, but I think the last person I've got on the list here who's actually present is Aaron Moon. So, Aaron, do you want to make your way to the lectern, and we'll sneak your question in before we get into other agenda items.
Thank you for that exception, Lord Mayor. So the Transport Accident Commission, TAC, recognises the critical role that local governments play in achieving Victoria's road safety targets, particularly delivering local projects that protect pedestrians and cyclists who are our most vulnerable road users. In 2025 alone, 52 pedestrians and 9 cyclists lost their lives in Victorian roads, and 583 pedestrians and 391 cyclists were hospitalised as a result of a car crash. Programs such as the TAC Local Government Grant Program are therefore really important opportunities for councils to fund safety improvements on our local streets. The state government recently announced $2.4 million in new grants through this program. However, the City of Melbourne was unsuccessful this year, while all of our neighbouring councils, Yarra, Maribyrnong, Marybeck, Port Phillip, Stonington, all received funding. Given that the City of Melbourne likely has the highest concentration of vulnerable road users in the state, along with lots of complex intersections, several 60-kilometre state roads running through our municipality, this seems like a real missed opportunity. Noting that the City of Melbourne has not received one of these grants since 2022, and before that, not since 2014. So what steps are we doing to strengthen our applications on this important road safety funding?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Aaron, and thank you for drawing this matter to the attention of councillors. That TAC program is indeed a very important one, and one which, as a result of you asking this question, I've had a look at and can see it is an important program that local government does access. In the case of the City of Melbourne, we submitted 2 applications for the 2025 TAC Local Government Grant Program, but were unsuccessful. However, we were successful in receiving a $2.37 million investment plan 43 for Safe System Pedestrians Infrastructure Program, the SSPIP grant from DTP. This grant is for the delivery of safety projects in East Melbourne, Kensington and North Melbourne. So not from the TAC, but the Department of Transport, that one, but going to the same end of safety. We were also successful in receiving a $1.9 million TAC grant for the Safer Local Roads program in FY 25-26. This is a multi-year program, and we are delivering projects such as the installation of wombat crossings in little streets and road safety projects in South Yarra and South Bank with those funds. The above grants are multi-year, and we are delivering the projects to improve safety for vulnerable road users. And we will continue to look for opportunities to apply for road safety grants. And as a result of you asking your question, I've actually asked the team here at the City of Melbourne to have a very, very good look to see what opportunities we might be able to identify for road safety initiatives under the program, because we have a long list of projects that we need to get on and fix. I will also say, while you're here before us, Aaron, that you asked a question the other week about the ghost bikes around Melbourne, and in particular you asked a question about a ghost bike in Kensington, and in fact Councillor David Griffiths and I visited that location and met with the family of that person, Will Richter. And I can confirm for you that the bike was removed by the City of Melbourne, as is our practice. But I can also inform you that we are looking at options around creating a very sensitive, long-term memorial in that area to acknowledge and celebrate Will's life, and that's sort of something that we're looking at the moment in discussion with the family, and I think that will be a very, very appropriate thing for us to do as a city and for the community.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, the time for questions has well and truly concluded, and so we will return to the outstanding questions that we have and any others that we have time for later on in the meeting. I'm just checking, David, do we move now to reports from management? Yes, we do. Okay. So I now call on the Deputy Lord Mayor, Rashina Campbell, to assume the role of Chair of the meeting in relation to reports where Council exercises responsibility under the Planning and Environment Act. So over to you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. There are 3 reports from management in this section of the meeting, and the first is agenda item 6.1, Ministerial Planning Referral ID 2025-3, 99 to 109 Lorimer Street, Docklands. I am going to request a presentation on this item, so I call on Nick McLennan, the Acting Head of Statutory Planning, to make a brief presentation. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor and Councillors. Before you tonight is a planning scheme amendment which seeks to introduce a site-specific planning control to 99 to 109 Lorimer Street, Docklands. This amendment has been referred to the City of Melbourne by the Minister for Planning for advice. Next slide, please. The site sits to the south of Lorimer Street and is bound by Hartley Street to the east, the Westgate Freeway to the south, Boundary Street to the southwest, and 111 Lorimer Street adjoins the site to the west. The site itself measures 1.78 hectares. Next slide, please. The subject site sits within the Lorimer precinct of Fisherman's Bend, Australia's largest urban renewal area and a key extension of Melbourne's central city. The subject site, as you can see on your screen, is highlighted and dashed in red with the number 3. The Fisherman's Bend Framework is the primary strategic document guiding redevelopment across the precinct and sets the long-term vision for land use, built form, streets, movement and community infrastructure. It emphasises a coordinated street and block layout to support traffic flow, walking, cycling and future public transport. It also identifies the location and role of key open spaces, community facilities and activity areas. Development proposals are expected to not only meet built form and design controls, but to reinforce the broader urban structure and movement network envisaged by the framework to support long-term precinct outcomes. Next slide, please. The proposal more generally seeks to facilitate the demolition of the existing buildings, staged use and development of the land for 4 multi-storey mixed-use buildings across 3 podiums, comprising accommodation, retail premises, office, place of assembly, including an arts and cultural hub, and ground-level public open space. The proposed layout of the built form, connections and open space is shown on your screen. Next slide, please. Importantly, as per the requirements of the Melbourne Planning Scheme, the proposal commits to meeting the required affordable and social housing requirements, which requires the provision of at least 6% of dwellings permitted under the dwelling density requirements, excluding any social housing uplift, as affordable housing, and providing a social housing uplift of 1 social housing dwelling to 8 additional private dwellings in addition to the provision of 6% affordable housing. So affordable housing and social housing. This equates to an affordable housing contribution of 36 dwellings to be leased at a discounted rate for 20 years and 50 complete dwellings to be provided to a registered agency as social housing. Condition 4.26 of the proposed incorporated document gives effect to this requirement. On your screen now is a diagram of the proposed land use mix and the open space area on the site. Next slide, please. Here we have a perspective of the site looking across Lorimer Street. Next slide, please. And a perspective looking east along the west. This is another slide. That's another internal site looking down Lorimer Street. Next slide, please. And a perspective looking east along the Westgate Freeway. That's the end. Any questions?
I've got one. I think there might be some others, Nick. You
Yes.
detailed it well, but could you just articulate exactly how many social housing and how many affordable housing units are provided for?
No problems. So in terms of the affordable housing, there's 6% of 603 dwellings. The maths here is dictated to by the planning scheme. We've outlined that in the planning report. I won't step through it step by step because it is quite long, but the affordable housing is 6% of 603 dwellings, so that's the equivalent of 36 dwellings as affordable housing. And social housing, which is 1 for every 8 dwellings over 603, equates to 50, so 50 social housing.
Thank you. That was very, very well done. Thank you for simplifying it. I think there might be some other questions from councillors. Yes, Councillor Lalo.
Can you just comment on the arts and culture hub, given the information I think you were mentioning about yesterday about, the location and everything, just providing a bit of background and also where it's at the moment?
Yes, so thank you, Councillor, and through you, Deputy Lord Mayor. The arts and cultural hub that has been proposed by the applicant is located in a tower that we say is not the appropriate location for that in this instance. The hub is located outside of the investigation area within the framework. We have put in our report and as part of our recommendation a suggestion that we believe it should be relocated on site. While we appreciate that the applicant is putting forward that contribution, we believe it is better suited in Tower 2 from memory.
Are there any other questions for Nick? Yes, Councillor Camillo.
Thank you. Just a quick question for the public at home. What's the difference social and affordable house? Very quickly, just for someone who's watching us, we know, but not everyone.
Yes. So social housing, I'm going to bear with me 1 second while I pull up the correct definition so I don't get it incorrect. Oh yes, could you go to my presentation, please? So I think I've got the wrong presentation up, but on slide, pardon me while I flick through all these pages, it's a big proposal. I'm going to say, can you try 13? 14. It's one of them that's got mixed up. Keep going. There we go. Apologies for the delay. So as you can see on your screen here, what we have is a definition of the two terms. So the Planning and Environment Act defines affordable housing as housing, including social housing, that is appropriate for the housing needs of very low and moderate income households. And the Housing Act defines social housing as public housing or housing owned, controlled or managed by a participating registered agency.
Are there any other questions for Nick? No? Thank you very much for that presentation. I now call on Joseph Indomenico from Track Consultants, who has requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. Joseph, I remind you to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and good evening, Lord Mayor and other councillors. My name is Joseph Indomenico from Tract Consultants. Tract has been responsible for acting on behalf of the proponent tonight. So if I wouldn't mind just getting the presentation shared on the screen quickly, if that's okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So the proponent, 99 Lorimer Street Project Proprietary Limited, is a joint venture partnership between Metrics and Pelligra. Together, this partnership brings the capital funding, construction capability and delivery experience to activate this landmark and catalyst project in Fisherman's Bend immediately upon its approval. The project team features renowned architect Architectus, as well as award-winning landscape architect Marla. It also features various other technical consultants that are proficient in buildings of this scale and master planned sites such as this. Thank you. Next slide. As Nick suggested, the site lies within the Lorimer precinct. We're all very familiar with the Fisherman's Bend precinct and Lorimer specifically. No doubt you are also very familiar with the emerging context within this precinct. The site and the precinct also sits immediately south of Yarra's Edge as well. Thank you. Next slide. One before, please. Thank you. This slide just quickly touches on the project's timeline, and as you can see, there is quite a date that the project spans back to, and really that, if anything, emphasises the significant consultation engagement that has occurred with the City of Melbourne, as well as relevant other stakeholders in this process, including the department and, as you'd expect, Melbourne Water and other referral agencies. It's an incredible milestone to reach tonight, very exciting for our project team, and we're naturally targeting an approval shortly, but naturally there are some further work items that we need to work through with the department and the council. Thank you. Next slide. Nick touched on the application particulars. If anything, I'm just going to highlight some of the headlines for you tonight, all contained within the delegate report and the application materials. But as you would expect, a project of this scale includes a significant provision of housing at a range of typologies and tenure options. Nick just walked through the affordable housing contribution as well as the social housing uplift, both of which are entirely compliant with the planning controls that apply in Fisherman's Bend. There's also a significant portion of non-residential land use proposed across the site, as well as significant public benefit in the form of a public open space, opportunity for an arts and cultural hub, as well as significant economic stimulus to not only the council but the state as well. Thank you. Next slide. Mindful of time, so we do naturally thank the council officers for all their hard work on this application. It is a big application, a lot of investment on both sides. We commend the recommendation and happy to take any questions that you might have.
I think there might be some questions, but thank you very much for that presentation, Joseph. It's very exciting to see investment of this scale proposed for Fisherman's Bend. I understand you said you endorsed the council officer's recommendation, so that includes the matters that have been identified by officers as requiring resolution, the key matters in relation to connections, in relation to affordable housing, and in relation to the location and configuration of the public open space. You're comfortable with those recommendations from our officers?
We certainly acknowledge the suggestions that have been made in the officer recommendation. We are, as a team, still working through those recommendations. Naturally, that they are quite significant, but what we can say quite clearly is that in terms of the affordable housing provision, that is a non-negotiable for us. We are fully committed to that as required under the planning scheme. Open space, it's our view, continued view, that as it has been proposed, it is a far superior outcome, particularly given the site acquisition and the consolidation that has occurred. In terms of the community centre itself, we do acknowledge the comments made by council and the suggestions for relocation. We still hold the view that the location is acceptable, but we are certainly willing and will be continuing the conversation with council as well as the department moving forward on that to find an outcome that we're all very happy with.
That's the Arts and Cultural Hub that you were just
Correct.
Thank you. Did you have an additional question, Councillor Liu?
So you're open to it, but not rejecting the fact that, because I think we're asking you to potentially relocate it. You're asking to put it another place. We're asking you to put another area, but you're suggesting that, but you're open to still considering our ideas and everything.
We're certainly open to continuing the conversation on that component. It's a voluntary contribution that we're obviously very committed to, and we think it would be a great opportunity for the site and the broader precinct. You've got a project that here is on the table and can be delivered quite quickly. It would be an incredible public benefit to provide in the short term. We're still unpacking what it means to relocate it within that other tower. But certainly it's something that we're open to exploring further.
And at worst, just tell the Cavallo Prestige guys to leave a few cars in there, and I'm sure you'll be fine.
Are there any other questions for Joseph from councillors? No. Thank you very much for that presentation, Joseph. I'm now going to ask for a motion to be put up on the screen. Thank you. I'm going to move that motion and I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you. And I will now speak to the motion. The matter before us tonight is the consideration of a ministerial planning referral of a site-specific planning control via specific controls overlay and an incorporated document covering 99 to 109 Lorimer Street Docklands. The applicant is 99 Lorimer Street Project Proprietary Limited, the consultant is Tract, and the architects are Architectus. The estimated cost of this development is $780 million. And it is worth noting that investment of this scale in Fisherman's Bend is a major vote of confidence in Australia's largest urban renewal area. The 4 towers that are proposed will deliver a true mixed-use development in the heart of the Lorimer precinct, with homes, jobs, culture and public space for the entire community. The planning scheme amendment would facilitate a staged mixed-use development across 4 towers, reaching a maximum of 57 stories. The development includes over 1,000 homes, 1,054 dwellings, retail and office space, a hotel with 200 rooms, an art and cultural hub, which you've heard about tonight, a supermarket, and very importantly, a significant amount of new public space. 3,075 square metres. Now, this is a decision for the Minister, but the City of Melbourne has a role tonight to provide its assessment and to identify and recommend to the Minister the conditions that we consider necessary to secure acceptable outcomes. The land is in the Lorimer precinct of the Fisherman's Bend urban renewal area. It's affected by CC74, DDO 67 and the environmental audit and flood overlays. Subject to the conditions in the management report, the built form is broadly consistent with DDO 67. The objectives for podium heights, tower setbacks and separation achieve a compliant overshadowing outcome to protected future parks during the required hours. Subject to these conditions, the proposed tower envelopes and separations will appropriately manage the visual bulk and mitigate wind tunnelling. The proposal delivers a mixed-use outcome with the non-residential floor area meeting or exceeding the Lorimer precinct minimums, supporting employment and activation in this vital urban renewal precinct. This will be a place-making development. In addition to the 3,075 square metres of public open space, the Arts and Cultural Hub, there is also a proposal for a significant affordable housing and social housing contribution, 36 affordable housing and 50 social housing units, which will be gifted to a community housing provider to meet public benefit requirements. For those interested in design, the proposal will use high-quality materials at the ground plane and the podium level, including sandstone, brick and glazing. There will be some green elements to soften the transition at the pedestrian interface. Officers are recommending a detailed facade strategy to give finer grain texture to both the podium and tower elements. And I hope that we, during these discussions, continue to see greater greening of the facade where possible. However, we will be asking the Minister to resolve some key matters as set out in the report before us tonight, if she is minded to approve this amendment. In particular, refining the proposed street and laneway network where they depart from the Fisherman's Bend framework. Our planning officers have recommended that the site will benefit from more connections and roads with increased permeability and access for vehicles. Also, confirmation of the location and configuration of the public open space and a mechanism to lock in the affordable housing outcomes. Subject to resolution of those key matters and the detail of which is set out in our planning officer's report, it is worth noting that this proposal advances the strategic intent for Lorimer by delivering substantial housing, significant employment and community infrastructure, as well as public open space. With the conditions in place, the amendment will secure design quality and outcomes for a future generation of residents and workers in Fisherman's Bend. Can I thank the proponent for working so well with our planning team and for your engagement with the Fisherman's Bend Task Force and the City of Melbourne to enable a high-quality, large-scale development for Fisherman's Bend. With all of that, I'm very happy to support and move this motion. Over to you, Councillor Leilu.
Thank you, and I'm very happy to support it as well. I know the site very well. Usually they're either once a month for coffee and cars, so it'll be weird to see anything apart from the dealership there and the cars not being around there. But I think it's an amazing investment. I want to thank the proponents, but I also want to thank our team for coming together to work together to build, actually get cracking on Fisherman's Bend, because it is something that we can unlock jobs and also housing in an area that is desperately needed. I'm going to focus probably more on the arts side because that's something that I'm really keen to get this going. I know our Creative Melbourne team and also the proponent have been talking about it, but I think it's positive that in 2018 Fisherman's Bend framework plan identified the need to incorporate an arts and culture hub within the Lorimer precinct. And this master plan included an investigation area. However, no specific location was locked in, done specifically at that level to enable consideration of the most appropriate location. It is encouraging that the proponent has been willing to explore incorporating the hub on their site. However, the location surrounding Lorimer Street is not a preferred one due to its location on a busy principal freight network and away from Lorimer Central. But relocating the hub to the western side of the site would provide a clear public frontage to Boundary Street opposite the future Lorimer Central open space and better proximity to the future public transport. I strongly encourage the proponent to continue to explore how this could be accommodated, as we already just mentioned now. And it would be great to see the hub delivered as part of this project. And I do hope that, working in good faith with our team, that this is something that can be continue forward. But overall, great project and happy to support as well.
Thank you, Councillor Leilu. Are there any other speakers to the motion? No. In that case, I'll put it to the vote. Could all those in favour please raise your hands? That is passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We now move to agenda item 6.2, Planning Permit Application TP 2025-385, 78 to 86 Dudley Street, West Melbourne. Would councillors like a presentation on this item? No. In that case, I now call on Shem Curry from Contour Consultants, who has requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this item. Shem, I remind you to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Good evening, councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name's Shem Curry. I'm a town planner at Contour Consultants, and I act on behalf of the applicant JD78 Dudley Proprietary Limited. As you've seen from the report, it's a 4-storey mixed-use office development with ground floor food and drink premises. The project team's actively engaged with the council officers over the last 12 months, dating back to a pre-application meeting in February 2025, and also participated in the Melbourne Design Review Panel process. Changes have been made to the proposal to respond to the officer comments that have been received through the application process, and conditions have also been provided to resolve the final proposal and make it appropriate for approval. The site holds a key corner when coming in and out of the Melbourne CBD, and the design reflects an appropriate balance of scale between, which is consistent with the maximum building height allowed under the planning control, while appropriately balancing the heritage streetscape of Dudley Street. The officer report goes into the detail around the proposal particulars, including the limited overshadowing cast to the Flagstaff Gardens in winter at a limited time, and the reasons why that's considered appropriate, but I'm happy to answer any questions on that item specifically or anything else to do with the application. It is encouraging to see a quality office development on the site with the streetscape activity associated with the ground floor food and drink premises, and we respectfully request council support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shem. Other councillors might have questions, but I just have one to begin. This is obviously a site that has many eyeballs on it. It is a very prominent location. I know that you've been through the Melbourne Design Review Panel process. Could you provide councillors with some further detail about the type of materials that will be used on the project? It would certainly be the expectation of the City of Melbourne that a site at such a prominent location would have a facade strategy that met the expectations of the community.
Thank you, councillor. You would have seen from the plans the design is done by Carr Architects, who are a quality award-winning architect. It has gone through the Melbourne Design Review Panel, as you have mentioned, and changes have been made to respond to the heritage streetscape in that regard. If the councillors were of a mind to include a permit condition requiring a facade strategy on this proposal, I'm confident our client would be supportive of that as a condition.
Thank you for that, Shem. Did other councillors have questions? Yes, Councillor Dr. Ball.
Thank you very much. So if I've understood the application, where it abuts the row of terrace houses on Dudley Street, there is a rooftop terrace which is for office use. It's not going to be a bar, a rooftop food and beverage offering. There's food and beverage on the ground floor, but this terrace is for office use only, and there's a condition containing its use to that. It may be only used in association with the office use, and there can be no loudspeakers recorded or live music played on that rooftop space. Is that correct?
That's correct, councillor.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Shem? No. All right. Thank you so much for your presentation. I am now going to ask for an alternate motion to be brought up on the screen. If you could just scroll down, council business. Thank you. I am going to move that motion and I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Leilu. All right, I'm now going to speak to this motion. The item before us is a statutory planning application for the demolition and use of the site at 78 to 86 Dudley Street, more commonly known to the City of Melbourne as Witches in Breeches. Not words that I have ever had the opportunity of using before in this forum. But this is a very, very well-known site to Melburnians. It is a prominent corner site opposite the Flagstaff Gardens on the fringe of the Hoddle Grid. The applicant is JD 78 Dudley Proprietary Limited. The consultants are Contour and the architect is Carr. The estimated cost of the development is $13.5 million. The proposal before us tonight seeks to demolish the existing building and construct a 4-storey development above 2 basement levels consisting of 22 car spaces. It also includes a retail floor area, as you've heard, a rooftop terrace with an open pergola and associated service rooms, and land for office, as well as food and drink premises. The property is located within the North and West Melbourne Heritage Overlay, and though I am advised that the stucco gargoyles that many of you may know do have artistic merit, the building is non-contributory in a heritage sense. The proposal before us tonight has been through the Melbourne Design Review Panel, and I want to thank the applicant for going through that process. We know that it does lead to better design outcomes, which we at the City of Melbourne, and we know those in the community, certainly appreciate, particularly for a site of this prominence. You've heard tonight how that panel process has led to refinements, and we are now looking to secure some of those through conditions. You'll see in the alternate motion before us tonight, there is an additional condition. That is that the applicant complete a facade strategy before development begins. This is so that the City of Melbourne can be satisfied that the development does meet the high standard we would expect for such a prominent location that thousands of Melburnians pass by every day. The scheme meets the 14-metre mandatory height in DDO 32, and the rooftop structures are exempt. You've heard tonight on behalf of the applicant confirmation that there will not be speakers on that rooftop. And you've also heard about the minimal and low impact shadowing, which importantly affects an area that is mainly comprised of an asphalt footpath and the edge of a garden bed. In those circumstances, the advice from our planning officers is that the outcome is acceptable given the height compliance overall. Management is recommending conditions, however, to require a ground level setback and commensurate stepbacks at levels 1 and 2 to better protect the adjoining heritage terraces to the east. There were 2 objections received. I thank our planning team for their careful consideration of them. I am satisfied with their assessment as to how the conditions recommended do meet those concerns. In those circumstances, I'm very happy to move and support this motion. Over to you, Councillor Leilu. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? No. In that case, I will put it to the vote. Could all those in favour please raise your hands? That has passed unanimously. Councillors, that now takes us to agenda item 6.3, Macaulay Public Acquisition Overlay Investigation. Any councillors have a... Yes, Lord Mayor.
Yes, I have. Deputy Lord Mayor, I have a conflict in relation to this item due to a campaign donation.
Thank you. Councillor Louis.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'd likewise have a conflict of interest due to a campaign donation also.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I also have a conflict due to an electoral donation.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. And I also have a conflict in relation to this item due to a campaign donation.
In the absence of the Lord Mayor and the Deputy, I would be happy to nominate Councillor Leliu to chair this item. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Rouse, thank you. And all those in favour of appointing... Yes, that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Leliu.
Cheers, thank you. So this is agenda item 6.3, Macaulay Public Acquisition Overlay Investigations. Would councillors like a presentation to this presentation? Nope. Okay, that's fine. I'm happy. I don't think there's any speakers to this particular. Oh, no, there's no speakers. So I'm happy to now move the motion that is on the screen. And if we just can keep going down. Yeah, and keep going down. Oh, that's it. Okay, cool. Thank you. And then I'm looking. Oh, should I second it? Ask someone to second it first. I moved it, and now I'm looking for a councillor to second it. Councillor Griffiths. Okay, thank you. And now, Councillor Guest, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Philip. Just in light of that, this is a motion about the acquisition of public land, and we have four councillors who've felt the need to remove themselves for a conflict of interest. I just think that possibly deserves some sort of explanation. It's a serious matter whether we're purchasing or not. I just wonder whether.
I don't know who that question was directed to, but I'll give it a go. I mean, the councillors who have left actually did declare that it was based on the fact that it was public. There's somebody who is involved or have particular interest on this. One of the lands, we don't know, did actually donate to their campaign. And so as a result, as part of the process and everything, they have excluded themselves, which is the right call and everything. So, yeah. No other questions? Councillor Ball?
I have a question which might be for Joe. Just to clarify, at 9.2.5, which describes one of the parcels of land 10 metres from that list of properties. So from the boundary of the properties towards the waterway, that 10 metres. Is that what that means? Okay. So it's a uniformly 10 metre strip of land. Okay, thank you very much.
Easy. Any other questions? No? Okay, cool. So I'm going to speak to this particular motion. That's great, isn't it? So look, this has come forward because, as we all know, North Melbourne and Macaulay is a growth area, and we all know open space is important to the local community and vital to achieving good outcomes for our current and also the future community. So tonight's decision is about strengthening council's ability to reserve the land needed for the new open space, drainage areas and the active transport corridor identified in the Macaulay structural plan to serve this growing population. At the moment, without a PAO, these intentions lacks transparency. Without a PAO, these outcomes can only be obtained through individual negotiations with planning permits applicants during the application process, a situation that is often too late, leading to delays and uncertainties in the planning process. Requesting management to advocate to the Macaulay Structure Plan Advisory Committee for the appropriate application of a public PAO will provide current and future landowners and the community with clear visibility of these requirements by protecting the land from inappropriate developments and reserving it for its intended future purpose. Incorporating this into the Macaulay Structure Plan Advisory Committee process provides a fast-tracked and coordinated pathway to unlock long plan open space for the rapidly growing Macaulay community. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the team, Evan, Joe, and the rest for the great work you do, and thank you for all the things you do. With this second, I would like to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Leilu. I'll speak briefly because this is actually a really exciting motion, and like you, I'd like to thank the officers who've been doing all of the work behind the scenes to bring this to us. As you can see from the motion and the attached report. It's a very detailed piece of work and, of course, is very necessary for anyone who is a regular attendee here. For anyone who watches it regularly, you will know that the question of public open space in Macaulay is one that we've been considering for a long time at Council and is becoming more and more important by the week. As the report notes, there's now 1,300 residents built into this space. And every week we see more and more people moving in, and that question about how council and government in general is going to provide open space for them is a very pressing one. And this goes some way to setting forward a process that will better enable us to provide that open space. Following on from the motion that was brought, I can't remember if it was late last year or perhaps early this year, in relation to Robertson Street, which was a piece of private land that was being offered for sale, and we asked officers to have a look at the capacity to have a public acquisition overlay placed on that, and so now a number of other sites have been identified with the same purpose. And hopefully demonstrates very clearly to the community the desire of this council to enable in any way that we can public open space to be available in this area that we see a very high density of population growing in. Hopefully we will be able to see the processes unfold and in the not too far distant future, some pretty prominent pieces of land. Anyone who's familiar with North Melbourne, anyone who's familiar with Kensington will recognise the names of some really prominent streets there and some really important spaces. And I hope that very soon we'll be able to see those becoming public open space for the populations that already live there and will live there in the future.
Many thanks for your contribution. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? No, if that's the case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. So that is Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Lowe, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Ball, Councillor Rouse and Councillor Carmelo. All those against? All those abstaining? I do note that Councillor Guest has not voted for anything, so let that be recorded. And the motion is passed. Thank you. Can we bring all the people back? Thanks.
Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 6.4, Draft Community Engagement Policy 2025. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? No. In that case, I call on B. McNicholas, who requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. Now, a gentle reminder at the start, B, you have 3 minutes.
I'm trying, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about this important draft 10-year policy. Effective community engagement is fundamental to the purpose of local government. The central question for this policy is whether engagement occurs early enough to inform decisions rather than after key directions have already been settled. A relevant benchmark has recently been provided by the Legislative Council Environment and Planning Committee. On the 3rd of March, that committee tabled its final report for the inquiry into community consultation practices, which contained 63 findings and 28 recommendations. The committee concluded that consultation processes across Victoria risk becoming procedural or tick box exercises when community views are sought only after key decisions have effectively been settled. It emphasised that effective consultation must begin early in the decision-making process and be grounded in local knowledge. This is particularly important for decisions affecting Melbourne's heritage places and landscapes, where local knowledge and early community input can materially improve outcomes. Our concern is that the community will not have an opportunity to comment on the final policy before it is adopted, or to see clearly how earlier submissions have informed the final document. A clear policy framework matters. It sets expectations for how engagement will occur across the projects, programs and decisions of Council for 10 years. The inquiry highlights several principles directly relevant to this policy. In particular, engagement processes should ensure that consultation occurs when community submissions and views can genuinely influence outcomes. Participants receive clear and sufficient information, including about what aspects of a proposal are actually subject to change. Engagement allows meaningful discussion rather than tightly controlled formats. Use of consultants is limited. Participate Melbourne be reformed, and participants are informed how their submissions and views influence the final decision. These principles go to the heart of effective engagement. When that consultation occurs early, when information is clear, when participants can see how their submissions and views are considered, trust in the process is strengthened and decisions are better informed. Council may therefore wish to please indicate whether, as a matter of strengthening this policy, the key principles, i.e. findings and recommendations, identified by the parliamentary inquiry, will be reflected in the final policy, as well as how those principles will be implemented in practice. I refer you to my submission for specifics, and I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Bea.
How did I go? 3
Centimetre
minutes.
perfect, as the great late Dennis Committee would say. And thank you for your intense interest, your forensic interest in this policy.
I had lectured for many years in this field at university, and I also submitted to the parliamentary inquiry, and it's a major flaw currently and for the last 10 years in the City of Melbourne. So we live in hope.
We do indeed. Thank you very much, Bea. I now call on... Oh, yes.
But of management as a result
Please.
of these submissions. So, Bea, you can resume your seat if you like. My questions for management in light of your submission. So the matter raised was that the final policy will be brought to a council meeting on the 28th of April, which the community cannot make oral submissions. So what mechanism will there be for those interested members of the community to provide their feedback on the final policy, which they have not yet seen?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and through you, Lord Mayor. So the process from here will be that we've take all the consultation from the formal consultation period as well as submitters this evening, and thank you very much for these detailed submissions, and that will be brought forward to Council in a final policy where we will show how we've also incorporated that feedback. A summary of the consultation will also be provided, and so that will then form the final policy that we'll ask Council to adopt at the end of April. We're also working through sort of more the operational and the practice guidance, and they will also be publicly available post the final policy being adopted as well.
I think Bea's question was, though, the final policy has not been made available to members of the public. The first time it will be made available will be in the council meeting papers. Council meetings, members of the public can't make these oral submissions. So what opportunity will members of the public have to be heard if they want to provide feedback on the final policy and they don't yet know what is in that?
Through a council meeting, there will be opportunity for written submissions, but yes, because the policy is incorporated under the Local Government Act, it has to come through to a council meeting rather than an FMC. So we'll very happily take any written submissions when the final policy is brought forward, and then we can, if there's any amendments that council wish to make at that point in time, we can ensure those are incorporated.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, DLM. We might return to that point in debate later on. Councillor Gladys Liu.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I also have a question for management.
Getting some good exercise there, Anthea. Thank you. Anthea Spinks, everyone, Director of Community here at the City of Melbourne.
As Bea has just pointed out, that the state government has got this consultation paper, which was only released a couple of weeks ago. Would you have an opportunity to have a look at it already, or and look at it in more detail to see what is good from there that we can take and put into our policy?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Lord Mayor. Yes, we've already begun a review of the state government's final report, which has been noted, dropped about the 3rd of March, I believe. There's a number of recommendations in that speak to both policy and procedure, and we're working with our team at the moment to review where some of the recommendations for that may actually flow through to the policy or our procedure. So definitely, and we can articulate that in our consultation summary as well in terms of how we've incorporated that.
All right, very good. I now call on Dr. Stan Kapp to address this committee. Great to see you here. Stan, a reminder to please speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor and councillors. EastEnders has given candid and detailed feedback as part of the evolution of the draft policy. Some of the principal matters have been taken on board, but the document is at such a high level that matters will be missed if they're not taken up in precise and detailed guidelines. The process undertaken by the City of Melbourne team in this policy is commendable, and thanks to Anthea and her team for that, notwithstanding my comments tonight. My major concern is that there is a need for more detail about the manner that this high-level document will be operationalised, so it is embedded in the life of all members of the City of Melbourne team. As an example, discussion on deliberative engagement is poor and not as precise as was included in the 2021 policy. We know the areas where Local Government Act prescribes deliberative engagement, but in the 2021 policy document at page 10, there was an inclusion of a commitment for deliberative democracy to be used on, quote, projects and policies where deliberative engagement is determined to be the most effective process to reach an outcome or make a decision. Now, the City has a proud record of other similar forms of deliberate engagement in the preceding years, and I don't need to go through those. At the very least, this new policy should include these words at page 12 of the new policy document. Frankly, I'm keen to ensure that a future council has some guidance about how it might consider a citizens' jury, people's panel or similar to explore a complicated or significant problem. As I think the only person to address the FMC in 2021, I advocated for more clarity about how community engagement can be undertaken, and the addition of the, quote, how to engage, unquote, section at pages 10 and 11 is an improvement. However, it's not as informative as it could be. One option and idea that I have would be to add an explanatory paper that describes in greater detail some of the methodologies that might be used and the criteria that will be applied to determine which of the agreed processes will be utilised. As B. McNicholas has provided to this FMC a detailed set of recommendations as to how the City of Melbourne should respond to the recent report from the State's Legislative Council, I suggest that the City of Melbourne team should be tasked with responding to these and modifying the draft policy to ensure compatibility where appropriate with the recommendations and findings presented. There is more work to be done for this policy to be in the best state to take us forward until its next review date in December 2030. An explanatory paper, as suggested in this submission, may be the most expedient way to address many of the issues that I and others may have. I also suggest that rather than committing to present a final document for adoption at the 28th of April Council meeting, the various matters raised this evening be considered and be discussed with submitters and others so a more robust final document can be iterated. To go ahead without any further consultation directly, only through written submission or whatever, without the final document being known, is actually a failing in community engagement in itself. So true community engagement would be maximised and a policy then evolved with befitting the City of Melbourne that can be submitted for adoption at the appropriate time. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Kapp, and dare I say, a comical irony in some of the points you were making about the lack of engagement on our engagement policy. But we move on. All right. Any question? Oh, sorry, Anthea, could you just please address the points made by Stan? In particular, he makes a point about this policy represents a downgrading of the council's commitment, support for deliberative and other participatory forms of consultation. And then I guess I might add my own piece to that, which is my understanding of our new council plan is it contains a commitment to those things plus participatory budgeting. If you could reflect on how that's picked up in this policy. And then secondly, and this goes to Councillor Liu's question earlier, the state government has released its policy about participation. How will that be considered, reflected in the document that's going to come back to council in April?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Stan, for your considered submission as well. And so, yes, based on your submission, but also a number of submissions we've received through the consultation period, we are proposing that we'll make some amendments to the deliberative engagement part of the policy. So that's very much in our sights. In terms of the integration of any of the recommendations that have come through the state legislative report. Again, we're looking at all of those various recommendations and how they apply to local government. Some of them will apply in different ways to local government to what they would to the state, and looking at where they might be incorporated into the policy versus the staff practice guidance. And similarly, the reference that you've made to that explanatory note, many of the things that you've referenced there are indeed very critical to operationalising the policy and to that sort of always embedded commitment into how we actually work across council and engagement. So again, they're very useful reflections for us as we work through some of the revised staff policy or practice guidelines that we'll also have publicly available versions of. I think they were the 3 points, Lord Mayor, that you asked me to respond to.
I believe they are. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that, Anthea. All right. I'm going to now request that a motion be put up on the screen. My understanding is there had been some discussion about an alternative motion, but I think we're now comfortable with the motion. There'll be some things that have been drawn out through discussion which address some of those matters that might have been picked up in the alternatives. So there's a motion there on the screen. I'm looking for a councillor to move it. Thank you, Councillor Liu. And I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Back to you, Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I just want to thank Bea and Stan for not only submitting the written comments, but also being here in person to deliver your thoughts. I also want to extend my thanks to those who have provided written submissions on this report, as well as all community members who have contributed their feedback throughout the process. As outlined in the report, every council is required to adopt and maintain a community engagement policy. And importantly, this policy must be developed in consultation with our municipal community. And I understand over the last 12 months, the team has undertaken this work, including completing a 2-phase engagement process. And the feedback received has been invaluable in shaping the draft policy before us. There are a few clear themes emerged through this engagement. Firstly, is the need for genuine, transparent communication. Exactly what Bea just mentioned, it shouldn't be a tick box activity. It has to be genuine. And secondly, it is has to be more accessible and easy to understand. Especially for people who are having English as a second language. Can you imagine you go through reading all the hard to understand information, and by then you probably lose the appetite to do anything else. So easy to understand information is paramount. And lastly is more inclusive methods of participation. We all know Melbourne is a multicultural city with so many people living here who are actually born overseas. So it is important to include everyone, We don't want our community engagement to be used by some activists who are very active in participating in our surveys, in our feedback system. We really want to engage everyone that we are serving here. And I'm very glad to see that the team has actually started something like this community engagement policy draft in Chinese. So it is very inclusive, and I think not only Chinese but other languages as well. So this is the way that we are engaging the multicultural community to hear from them. So this policy will definitely help the team in working across the organization to ensure that engagement efforts truly enable our community to contribute to the City of Melbourne's projects, policies, and plans. I want to take this opportunity to thank all officers led by Anthea involved in preparing this draft community engagement policy. And I can assure you the feedbacks that we have received in the time between the draft policy was prepared to the time that the final policy will be prepared, these information, these comments will be taken into consideration, just like what you have sent in the last 24 hours, and others will be considered before we have the final draft. So I do look forward to seeing the final draft in April. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Over to you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Liu, for your leadership on this and a very comprehensive introduction of the motion tonight. It's been fantastic to go through the portfolio process with you around this, and the document in its many forms, I think, is much better for your involvement and oversight of it. And obviously we've had a number of really good conversations, not just tonight, but across the councillor group leading into tonight. And even better informed by having the contributions from Stan and Bea. So thank you to both of you. And noting again that it was a suggestion from management that we do bring the draft document to this meeting, an FMC meeting, which is what allows people to actually speak to it, because as Anthea noted, it's going to be something which will have to go through a formal council meeting later on, where members of the public won't get to speak to it. So it's fantastic, first of all, that we've gone through that part of the process, but also that people have made use of that opportunity. This is a really exciting document and really underpins the way that we want to see communications and consultation happening between the City of Melbourne and everyone who comes to the city, no matter whether they come here because they're residents, whether they come here because they own businesses, whether they come here to work, or whether they come here just because they're visiting and have a right to say how they'd like to see the city make its decisions and move forward. I was particularly struck by the process that we went through last year, led by the Lord Mayor and the Melbourne 2050 Summit, and the involvement of young people in particular. And it's really great to see the opportunities that will come out of this document when it goes through the full process, to engage that really youthful element that we have here in the City of Melbourne, and to ensure that their voices are heard as well as we plan for the future of a growing and young city. So with all of that said, I thank officers for the work that has gone into this so far. I thank them for the work that's going to go into the collation of the responses that we've received, and I look forward to seeing this document come back to us in a changed form, an even better, shinier form on the 28th of April.
Thank you very much, Councillor Griffiths. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak to this item? Yes, Councillor Owen Guest, over to you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Gosh, David, I've never known you to be so excited over a document. But we've heard it here. It's an exciting document. Thank you, Bea, Gladys, David. All said some good things. You're right. It was very interesting what was released the other day at state level. That key word you mentioned, genuine, community consultation, they're just words. This is just a document. I think it has potential, but the proof be in the pudding, not the paperwork. The history, as I've seen it, and I think my fellow councillors, especially the new ones, have seen over the last 5 years, we went through a process last year for the 4-year plan, and we saw problems in that, and then we discovered that the previous one, apparently, I think the number was 42. Someone can correct me if I've got that wrong, but I think 42 is the number consulted in the 4-year plan going further back. So starting from a very low base. One of the recommendations that we're trying to push through is to have questionnaires go out with our rates. Seems like a very obvious starting point to get some quality data, especially from the people who actually pay for the place. They do deserve a look in. 41,000 of us, as opposed to a few million people who I think we like to call customers. So this document has a lot of potential, but really the proof will be in what comes out of it. If we get some good data from good sources and we're genuine, it comes down to us. We have to be genuinely listening and taking into account, as opposed to what was suggested by that recent report at state level. So thank you all. Hopefully a good start.
All right, thank you, Councillor Guest. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? I'll speak briefly to it as well, because a little bit like Councillor Griffiths and Councillor Liu, who's done some great work on this, I think it's very exciting. And can I begin by thanking the team behind it? So to Rushda, to Anthea, to Danuki, I think this is a really important bit of work and a very thoughtful and considered bit of work as well. I think that at its core, the policy is about something quite simple, making sure people have a real say in the decisions that affect them, and also providing greater clarity around some of those consultation processes as well. We need to be more upfront with the community about when their feedback can shape a decision and when it cannot. We're trying to get the BS factor out of our consultation processes. So to put it simply, if your input can make a difference, we will engage. If a decision is already constrained in some ways, and that is the truth of modern governing, then we'll be clear about that as well, and the why as well. And I think that honesty matters, because ultimately it builds trust in us as an institution, in our governing processes, and trust is really the secret sauce to good governing in this modern era. The policy also gives clearer guidance on when we engage around big citywide plans, major infrastructure projects, and new or changing policies. I do agree that there are aspects of this policy that still need to be fine-tuned, and I think our submitters tonight have hit the nail on the head several times on that score, so look forward to seeing that getting picked up in the next draft. I also think that there's some really good elements in this policy as well, and I think Councillor Gladys Liu really made a very important point, that we need to make sure that when we're out consulting, that we go to great lengths to ensure that all Melburnians are having the opportunity to be heard. And I'm really pleased and really proud of the new efforts that we made around engaging with multicultural communities, young people, people who speak languages other than English, and people who are often underrepresented in our consultation processes. And I do want to say, Councillor Gladys Liu, you've really led the charge on that front, so well done to you, and good to see it being reflected here in this policy. And great to see it also written in Mandarin, which I thought was pretty cool. We certainly welcome further community feedback. I think Anthea has taken us through the process which will allow there to be feedback as part of it coming back to Council on the 28th of April. In truth, if that ends up being a little too compressed, there are all sorts of ways through a process here at Town Hall that we can ensure that I may end up. I don't necessarily want this to happen, but if we need to, we can defer that consideration so that we get opportunity to have that further round of input. And I guess that bears the truth that no consultation process is ever perfect, and indeed this engagement policy around our engagement policy is evidence of that. But we're muddling on, and that's a good thing, and I'm confident we're going to get to a really good outcome in the end. And indeed, it will be a beacon for how modern government goes about engagement and pick up on the best thinking around participatory processes, deliberative processes, participatory budgeting, and all sorts of exciting things as well. So I look forward to welcoming that further final round of feedback. I congratulate the team on the work done so far, and I look forward to seeing the final version when it comes back to us on the 28th of April. Okay, if there aren't any other submitters, we'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand, and I declare that carried unanimously. All right, we move on to agenda item 6.5, appetite for a pilot business improvement district in Docklands and Collins Street. Would councillors like a presentation in this agenda item? I think that might be worthwhile. This is a very exciting and innovative new thing that we're doing here, and it does deserve some explanation for the public. So Mark Cochrane-Holly will invite you to the lectern, our Director of Economic Development, International and Investment, to make a brief presentation.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and through you as Chair. Good evening to you, Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors and members of the public. I'll go to the next slide. Thanks, Cal. Tonight, management are presenting a report with a number of recommendations acquitting actions arising out of the March 2025 council meeting and proposing next steps in establishing business improvement districts within the City of Melbourne. Next slide, thanks. In March last year, council asked management to engage with 2 of our 10 business precinct associations, the Docklands Chamber of Commerce and Collins Street Traders Association, in particular their appetite for a special rate scheme to be applied to their geographic areas, and then secondly to provide a recommendation for next steps in one or both of the association areas. This work is anchored in 2 key strategic documents with council plan containing a deliverable that management explore mechanisms to deliver business improvement districts, and the Melbourne Advantage has an aligned priority that supports the establishment of BIDs. In acquitting the action from the March meeting, you'll see in the appendices of the report that both the Collins Street and Docklands precincts have strong appetites to pursue the establishment of business improvement districts through the mechanism of a special rate scheme. Next slide, thanks. By way of a bit of background, BIDs are globally successful business-led and driven models. They originated in North America but have expanded across Europe, Africa, Asia and the Pacific. They harness collective vision of landlords and businesses in a geographic area to improve amenity, experience and economic outcomes. 2 highly successful BIDs include the Times Square Alliance in New York City, which was established in the early 90s, with priority work streams focusing on cleanliness and safety, support for local businesses, events, activations, arts and culture, and support for people in need. The Alliance has an operating budget of just under $30 million US, and since its establishment, it has seen annual foot traffic growing from 27 million to 50 million a year. Annual economic activity has grown to over $5 billion US. Public space and safety initiatives have reduced crime by approximately 40%, and over 200 new businesses have been created. The new West End Company in London, which was established in 2003, has also identified priority actions to improve customer experience and marketing, insights and innovation and sustainability. West End Company has an annual operating budget of £11 million, and a key accomplishment has been raising £175 million worth of funds for transformational public realm and infrastructure enhancements to Bond Street, Oxford Street and Regent Street. These are just 2 of over 2,000 successful BIDs worldwide of varying size and complexity. Next slide, please. Successful BIDs, particularly the larger and more sophisticated ones, are successful because they have taken a pragmatic approach and started with a trial period. This is certainly true in London and Singapore and more recently in Sydney. Next slide, thanks. The proposed pilots will undertake interventions co-designed with stakeholders consistent with a BID but on a smaller scale. And at the same time, we'll be seeking voluntary contributions from those stakeholders for delivery of a small number of high-impact initiatives. This will allow us to establish a proof of concept supported by data before proceeding to any next stage. Management believes that this is a pragmatic, low-risk approach in order to build confidence in the concept of business and landlord-led programs and projects, and again will allow councillors to make an informed and data-led decision on a way forward. Next slide, thanks. As you can see on the slide, we are proposing pretty aggressive timelines. Over the next 16 weeks, we'll be engaging with collaborators and confirming projects and financial contributions from those stakeholders, with a view that on-the-ground interventions will take place from July this year until April next year, after which management will formally report back to Council on the success of the pilot programs and a recommendation for next steps. Happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Mark. Any questions? Councillor Andrew Rouse.
Comment and a question, if I can. Thank you, Lord Mayor. First of all, for those of you at home and can't see, happy St. Patrick's Day, of course, Mark, wearing the matching Kelly green tie and handkerchief as well. I don't know why everyone else is not wearing their greens for St. Patrick's Day. But to the question, the timeline that we saw on the screen there, starting March 2026 and extending through the precinct engagement phase, the co-investment trial phase, and the report back in May of next year. That is a long time between now and receiving that report back, giving us advice on, hey, this was a fantastic new innovation, we should do more of these, or actually didn't quite work out as we had hoped, we'll go back to the status quo. On record, are you happy to commit to providing updates to councillors through the portfolio process? These are meetings that both Kevin and myself attend on a monthly basis, so we can keep councillors updated on the activities in relation to the bid trial.
Thank you for the question, Councillor, through you as Chair, Lord Mayor. Yes, absolutely. As we have embarked on this program, we've been bringing regular updates to our business and economy portfolio, and we will continue to do that on a monthly basis. Obviously, other councillors are more than welcome to come and attend those portfolio meetings, and any papers provided at those meetings are available to all councillors. In addition, we'd be more than happy to provide some briefing papers when we hit particular milestones throughout the project ahead of that formal reporting process back next year.
Brilliant, thank you.
Councillor Camillo.
Thank you. Mark, can you just explain a little bit to the public why did we choose Docklands and Collins Street precinct amongst all the other groups, just for clarification and transparency for who's watching us, please?
Thanks, Councillor Camillo, and again through you, Lord Mayor. We reached out to all our precinct associations and asked which ones were willing to put their hands up, and it was essentially Collins Street and Docklands were the two precincts that felt that they were capable and able and willing to embark on this project.
Excellent. Other questions? I've got a question, and look, I'll talk further about my enthusiasm for bids in the debate later on, but I do want to ask a question about timelines. Sydney has announced, their framework for standing up bids probably about 2 years ago. To date, how many bids have they got away in Sydney?
They've got 0 bids, Lord Mayor. They go to their first ballot next month in April. I think it's worth noting that the difference between New South Wales and Victoria is under the Local Government Act, Section 163 of the Local Government Act. Councils in Victoria have the ability to impose or go to a ballot for a special rate scheme or special rate charge. That didn't exist in New South Wales, so they had to go through quite an extensive legislative process to get to this point. So we do have a competitive advantage, if you like, ahead of New South Wales.
Okay. And the presentation in the paper notes you're reporting back to us by May 27, and you described that as a bit of a breakneck speed. Maybe it's just my ambition for Melbourne, but that seems like a long way away to me. can we get a commitment that the city will endeavour to try and stand up a bid as soon as practicable? And so if it is the case that we can deliver and stand it up ahead of May 2027, that we absolutely will?
Yes, I think we're comfortable making that commitment. I think the thing to bear in mind is what the data tells us at the end or towards the end of that trial period. So we'll be certainly led by the data to allow councillors to make an informed decision and essentially provide the bid the best opportunity to be successful.
Yep. Okay. Understood. Any other questions for Mark? All right. Oh, Councillor Gladys Liu.
Will there be any financial commitment from the council?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Lord Mayor. Any financial commitments would be contained within our regular annual budget and planning process. So we won't be seeking more funds from the council for any initiatives. We'll be utilising our budget as it's approved in the next 3 to 4 months.
All right. Any further questions? No. Thank you, Mark, for that presentation. Now, I believe there is a motion which has been drafted, which I will ask to please be put on the screen. And just looking to you, Councillor Louis, to confirm that you're okay with that and you are happy to... Yep, that is the one. Yep. So you're moving that, looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Back to you, Councillor Louis.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm also very enthusiastic about this program, and can I first start by thanking Andrew, who I think has had many sleepless nights and lots of works following it from the beginning, together with Mark, and thank you for Sarah for jumping on board now. I think the magic word that the council tonight is voluntary. So we're not at the stage where we're at a bidding stage. We're not a compulsory stage, but we've been working, and we've got to thank the Docklands Chamber as well as the Collins Street Precinct for putting their hands up. They've been extremely enthusiastic about getting on board and working, and their members have also been very enthusiastic in trying to drive this new program forward as well. It's a great partnership program once it's developed. So the first stage is the voluntary part, where people actually that want the work done initiate their programs. So whether it's going to be planter boxes, more lighting, marketing programs, or promotions, they would determine between themselves, the two precincts, where they want the money spent. And then they would then get the members individually to put the ones that volunteer, put their hands up. So it's not about dragging them and compulsory requiring money or levies from them. So this stage is about working together, hand in hand in a true partnership. And I think this is the step that we're a little bit different to the other bid models. Globally, but I think it's one that we can say it's democratic, and I think that's why I think Docklands and Collins Street have jumped on board to try and work together. They're two very successful precincts, several hundred members each, and I'm sure that once they get their projects together, we work it through. I'm sure the council then can support them in growing and activating their precincts further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Louis. Councillor Andrew Rouse.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm also excited for this. I think it's fantastic that Council is trying new things. As you said, Lord Mayor, we'll hear back in 12 months with the report on the outcome. I have every belief that it's going to be positive. If it's not the great success we're hoping it is, then fantastic. Let's own that. Let's say we tried something, didn't quite work out, and let's move on to the next thing that we can try. I think this is fantastic for businesses. It allows more input from them for the ideas that they might have as to how we can uplift the business precinct areas. And of course, as was mentioned before, direct investment from the businesses who are keen to see and have that input with no additional cost to council, I think is a fantastic benefit for everyone. And I'm really keen and excited to hear the ideas that the businesses who voluntarily choose to opt in and involve themselves in this process have about how we can improve the areas that their businesses are located in. Very happy to second and support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Other councillors wish to speak to this item? I'll just jump in and say very briefly that I also am very excited, enthusiastic about this voluntary co-investment pilot that we're running in Docklands and Collins Street. I want to put on the record my thanks to Mark and Andrew and the team on this. I want to thank councillors who have actually been pushing on this as an idea for some time as well. I want to thank the CEO, Alison Layton, who's really personally involved herself in this process as well to help gee it along, which is good to see. To the Docklands Chamber of Commerce and Daniel Hibbert, and to the Collins Street Precinct Group and Luke Harris, I want to say well done to them for leaning in. At first blush, this is something that you might think businesses might not be too enthusiastic about. The idea of voluntarily paying more rates than they otherwise would need to is something you think some businesses would run a mile from. But when you look at the experience of bids or similar structures overseas, they have been very successful in activating key parts of major cities. And we are very hopeful that we can see a similar thing happen here in Melbourne. I have seen in recent times firsthand in London the transformation that bids have made in certain precincts. If you travel through the streets of London, you see the way certain neighbourhoods are just lit up so beautifully and decorated so beautifully at Christmas time. And people from all over Europe are travelling to that neighbourhood, that borough, to see what's happened. And it's all being funded through a bid-like structure with the City of London working with that local business precinct to achieve such an incredible outcome. So when we look at Docklands and we look at Collins Street, I can see enormous potential for uplift, and it's a very, very exciting process ahead, and looking forward to the team working on it and getting that report back. All right, Councillor Camillo.
One very quick point, Lord Mayor. I think the importance of safety and cleaning and the responsibility of the business and all community get it together in that topic. So everyone works, and I think the bid can bring that element. And it was mentioned by Mark today, and I think it's very important for the City of Melbourne. Just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo. If there's no further submitters, we'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. All right, we move on to agenda item 6.6, Municipal Association of Victoria State Council meeting, May 2026. Would Council like a presentation in relation to this item? No, in that case, I'm going to request that a motion please be put up on the screen. That is indeed it. I'm happy to move that motion, and I'm looking for a councillor to second it. Councillor Dr. Olivia Ball, would you consider seconding this motion? Yes. It is up there on the big screen as our councillor who also supports me on MAV matters. I appreciate you seconding this, Councillor Dr. Ball. All right, I'll speak very briefly to it. Thanks to councillors and officers for all the work that's gone into our submission. Councillors proposing to put forward 4 motions: support for childhood development, strengthening acute mental health responses across Victorian communities, 3rd, support for Vic Health, and 4th, support for and retaining Sustainability Victoria. 4 very important topics. I look forward to them being lodged with the MAV, and I look forward to them meeting with support from other councils across Victoria when we meet for our all-important pre-election conference on the 29th of May this year, and no other place than here at Melbourne Town Hall. You know where you're to be on that day, everyone. Over to you, Councillor Dr. Ball.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm very happy to second this motion as your alternate to attend MAV, the council meeting coming up in May, which is an important meeting of Victorian councils that they ask the Lord Mayor, all mayors and CEOs to attend. And I'd just like to draw attention to one particular of these motions that we seek to put up tonight to the MAV concerning the proposal by the state government to axe Sustainability Victoria. I think it would be true to say that all local governments benefit enormously and have benefited from Sustainability Victoria since it was first founded about 20 years ago, I think it is. Certainly the City of Melbourne has benefited from collaboration with Sustainability Victoria over many years, particularly in relation to waste and the circular economy, but also procurement and climate action. Our officers have noted how abolition of Sustainability Victoria will have impacts on many of our programs, which we are so keen to grow rather than abandon. For instance, it's an important source of grant funding for local government. It's funded a number of our circular economy projects just in the last 5 years. To give you some examples, our FOGO pilot in high-rise apartment buildings, in which we have trialled having dehydrators on site in apartment buildings. Of course, the great majority of our residents live in high-rise apartment buildings, and we are so keen to make FOGO, which is to say composting, available for residents of apartments in high-rise apartment buildings. This has been a pilot assisted by funding from Sustainability Victoria. We're also very proud of the Kensington Circular Economy Precinct, as I think is everyone from Kensington, which has some fantastic innovations, including my personal favourite, underbench reusable refrigerated milk kegs in cafes, which has eliminated countless thousands of 2-litre plastic bottles when you have a keg that goes under and it's replaced, and we refill the milk in every cafe, and we all love our coffee in Melbourne. So may that flourish, and we are so grateful to Sustainability Victoria for supporting that. And also, as ever, behaviour change campaigns, such as we have rolled out with the very, very successful and effective uptake of FOGO, composting and garden waste in low-rise and apartment buildings and individual residences in the rest of the municipality, has also been funded courtesy of Sustainability Victoria. It has a circular economy business innovation centre. We've heard a lot about business innovation tonight and how we want to support our businesses. We especially wanted to support them to design out waste from the beginning, not just to recycle and reuse, but to eliminate it at its source wherever possible, and find other innovative solutions to businesses participating in and maximising their circular use of resources. And that's another example. We have, just in the last 5 years, benefited from Sustainability Victoria. And critically, they also provide a procurement or purchasing service and advice. It's critical technical advice that all local governments can benefit from as a trusted source of information to help councils understand how best to buy recycled content and circular materials, which not just benefits us as the purchaser, but provides the market that we desperately need to grow as rapidly as possible to make recycling products viable. and to grow the use of recycled materials. So this is just a handful of ways that Sustainable Victoria has benefited us just in the last 5 years. And given the urgency and the magnitude of the climate and biodiversity challenges facing all of us, which the consequences of which are felt so tangibly by local government, this so-called cost saving is in fact inducing multiple costs down the track at exactly the time when we need to transition as quickly as possible to circular economies and sustainable ways of living. So as a council, I hope we will all support this motion to implore the Allen government not to cut this excellent body doing demonstrably worthwhile things that benefit us all. And I second the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ball, and I'm sure we will hear you repeat those arguments with just as much energy and vigour on the 29th of May.
I'm only the alternate, so I do hope you'll be able to attend and make those arguments even more forcibly.
Touche. Okay, do we have any other speakers to this item? Councillor Owen Guest.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I also wanted to speak to a particular motion, the one about supporting early childhood development. Many of you know that councils provide maternal, child and health nurses and have done for many years. What you may not know is that the Maternal, Child and Health Memorandum of Understanding that was signed between local government and the Victorian government outlined a 50-50 funding split. That is, it was intended that the state government would fund half the cost of maternal, child and health nurses, and in return councils would deliver that service and contribute the other 50%. In practice, that has simply not been the case. Councils' contributions across this state have ranged between 60 to 70% of the total delivery costs. At the City of Melbourne, our current contribution, it's nowhere near 50%. We're contributing approximately 70%, significantly higher than the Victorian government's share. As councils across this state look to negotiate the next maternal, child and health nurse agreement, it is so important that this is not just another case of cost shifting to councils. This is a vital life-saving service that is provided to every child born in this state and their mother. But the reality is many councils cannot afford to continue shouldering that burden well in excess of the half that they were expected to fund. We know that plenty of councils in this state are under real pressure to deliver services, and there is a risk that if we do not return to that 50-50 cost split, there will be councils that will provide reduced, or in worst case scenarios, no maternal, child and health nurse services. And that would be a disaster for families across this state. That is why one of the four motions we are considering tonight looks at returning to that funding parity to make sure that this vital service is one that can be sustainably funded into the future. And that is more important than ever. In Victoria, around a quarter of children start school developmentally vulnerable. That is, in the first 5 years of their life, they are not meeting the key milestones they should by the time they start school. And maternal child and health nurses are one of the very few and perhaps the most direct points of contact with children in those early years. So if this service cannot be sustainably funded, how much worse is that statistic going to get? I support all four motions before us tonight, but I draw this to your attention so that those of you following along understand what is at stake in this pre-election year as local government articulates what needs to be done if we're going to provide the services that our community needs.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I feel like we may need to insist you also attend on the 29th of May here at Melbourne Town Hall for this important debates to be had at the MAV conference. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? No, in that case, sure.
Because my question, it's not that I'm against any of these particular items. I just, as you know, I always think every institution has to make choices. The state government is not exactly flush with funds, and nor are we. So one has to ask the question, would I prefer this over and above perhaps a fully funded police force, for example? Everything's worthy. I'm happy for them to go on block if you want. That's a point, though, that I think is worthy of making, of how at least I think about things, a hierarchy of preferences. There's nothing intrinsically bad in these 4 items. It's just a question of where one would place them, and I'm conscious as we ask the state government to fund things, they can't fund anything everything, I should say, just as we can't.
All right, thank you for that contribution, Councillor Guest. If you wish, you can move an amendment and see if there's a seconder for it. And
I'm happy to make that point.
Okay. All right, thank you for that contribution. Are there any further councillors who wish to speak on this? Okay, in that case, we'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Declaring that carried unanimously. I could have moved an amendment requiring all councillors to be there on the 29th of May, but don't know how that would have fared, given some of the responses we got there. All right, moving on to the next agenda item, 6.7. Which is opportunity for international engagement. Deputy Lord Mayor Campbell proposed participation at GNET's Leaders Summit Tokyo. Does any councillor have a conflict in relation to this item?
Lord Mayor, I have a material conflict in relation to this item because I stand to personally benefit from the outcome.
All right, thank you very much, DLM. We will give you a moment. And while the Deputy Lord Mayor is leaving the room, I will call on Chris Thrum, who requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. Thank you, Chris, for your interest on this one. And we look forward to your contribution.
I was looking forward to talking to Rashina. Maybe another day. Thank you, Lord Mayor Nick Rees. We're looking at agenda item 6.7, opportunity for international engagement for DLM Campbell to have a proposed travel to the GNET Leaders Summit in Tokyo. I'll begin by saying this is the Kulin Nation. This place is called Melbourne, also known as Naarm. It's been known as Naarm for thousands of generations. Respect to elders past and present. I have to say, happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. If you look at the logo of the City of Melbourne right now, you're looking at the beautiful green, emerald green colour in the City of Melbourne. Melbourne's got a deep connection with Ireland, of course. And Jo Kennington, she had a green dress on today, which is great. Anthea, she had a green dress on and green earrings, which is beautiful too. Woman over there, blonde-haired woman before, she had a green dress on. Bloke over there, he's got a green shirt on too. And right now, underneath all this, I've got the Rocksteady green T-shirt as well. Pat Monahan in Rocksteady Records is a great supporter of the Irish too and Irish music. So very happy St. Patrick's Day. Now back to the conference that Councillor Campbell will be attending, which I'd fully support that she attends. We're looking at one of the most exciting conferences in Asia. We're looking at the largest global innovation conference in Asia, the Sochi Tech 26. Very exciting conference is going to be. It's going to be focusing on highlighting innovation, AI, robotics, resilience, entertainment as well. And so the Deputy Lord Mayor is going to be taking a lot of learnings, a lot of experience and knowledge away from attending the conference in Tokyo. So I think it's tremendous that she's going. If Councillor Philip Liu was here as well, where are you, Phil? Love you too. If he was here, he'd remember and recall that for more than a decade, I've been advocating for international travel for City of Melbourne councillors and for the Lord Mayor as well. I want to thank Francis Fu. I want to thank Mark Cochrane-Holly and Sarah Kwan. I know you guys do a lot of brilliant work, and just to hear the dialogue and the conversations of the management team to the Lord Mayor and the councillors, I think the general public can get a reading of the level of talent and brains, depth and skill that the City of Melbourne have, and I can assure people that management and the councillors and the Lord Mayor are doing everything they can to do the best for their city. And part of doing the best for the city is to send councillors overseas to attend conferences like this. So I fully support Councillor Campbell, Deputy Lord Mayor Campbell, to go to Tokyo.
Thank you
for
very
Gladys Liu, I can say share, share, do share.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris Thrum. All right. We will now move on to a motion, if that is okay. Can we please bring up on the screen the motion, and looking for a councillor to move that. Thank you, Councillor Kevin Louis. I will second it. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm very pleased to move the item before us tonight, which seeks the approval for the Deputy Lord Mayor to represent Melbourne at the GNet Leaders Summit and the Sushi Tech Tokyo, with most of the costs covered by the host, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. The item has been amended slightly to reflect the change in scheduling. This results in the proposed removal of Osaka from the Deputy Lord Mayor's itinerary, which will also reduce the final cost to Council. GNet convenes city leaders to share practical solutions on urban innovation and challenges, urban climate and disaster resilience, including greening, decarbonisation and technology, areas central to our council plan. The summit's theme aligns with Melbourne's priorities: resilient infrastructure, decarbonisation, greening initiatives, and tech-enabled wellbeing. Participation gives the City of Melbourne a platform to present our policies and learn from more than 50 global cities expected to attend. The Deputy Lord Mayor will use the summit as an opportunity to showcase City of Melbourne programs for urban innovation, city greening, and sustainable buildings, as well as regulatory work around energy and land use for data centres. As Asia's largest innovation conference and showcase, Sushi Tech Tokyo is an innovative initiative by the Tokyo Metropolitan Government to create sustainable urban values by fostering cutting-edge technology, startups, and innovative ideas. I know that the Deputy Lord Mayor will learn from cities like Singapore in how they are planning to manage surging data centre electricity use, which will help the City of Melbourne better plan for the future. I look forward to reading the Deputy Lord Mayor's report on her return, and I thank her for taking the time in her busy schedule to attend this conference.
Thanks, Councillor Louis. I, as seconder, will just add to that briefly by saying, I think the Deputy Lord Mayor's participation in the GNet's Leaders Summit and the Sushi High Tech Summits are important for Melbourne. I do note that the invitation comes from the Tokyo Metropolitan Government with flights, accommodation and incidentals covered. The Governor of Tokyo, this is the mayoral equivalent, Governor Koike, is probably the most successful political figure in Japan. Unlike so many others in that political system, she just keeps getting re-elected, and she has done absolute wonders for Tokyo as a city. We often read about Japan being a country which is experiencing population decline, but Tokyo proper continues to grow. And as it's growing, it's also made huge leaps in terms of its sustainability, and it's just world-leading in its efficiency, and many of the things it's doing around urban innovation, climate resilience, city greening, decarbonising, and bringing smart technology into the operations of the city. So I think there's lots and lots of benefits that are to flow from these conferences, and like Councillor Louis, very much looking forward to seeing the Deputy Lord Mayor's report upon her return. So, did any other councillors like to speak to this item? Councillor Mark Scott.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would also like to support this motion. I'm a big supporter of councillors travelling. In my corporate life of 30 years, I travelled extensively and learnt a lot for the company that I worked for and the company that was investing in me during those travel visits. So I'm a big supporter of councillors travelling. It is not a waste of ratepayers' money, as Honorary Councillor Chris Thrum mentioned in his address. This is not really just about attending another international conference. It's about ensuring Melbourne remains globally connected, competitive, and relevant in a rapidly changing world. Our community does benefit directly when we show up on the global stage. These forums are where cities share solutions on the issues that I think our residents, our ratepayers do care about. Economic opportunity for the city, vibrant small businesses within our city, tourism recovery, major events, and creating safe, inclusive public spaces. Tokyo is one of the world's leading cities. I've travelled there extensively myself on my own dime over the last 3 years, and it's a great place to see urban activation, transport integration, and in particular the nighttime economy, which is big in Tokyo, let me tell you. There is real practical value in learning what works and bringing those ideas back to Melbourne to support our traders, attract visitors, and strengthen our city's economy. Importantly, I think relationships matter. The connections built at forums like GNets open doors for future investment, partnerships, and cultural exchange, all of which flow through to jobs, visitation, and opportunities for our community. We just had this week the announcement of Melbourne being the best city in the world, and it's great to claim that, but there's a lot of work that goes into that. And I think if we want Melbourne to remain a leading global city, the best in the world, not just in reputation but in outcomes, we need to be present, engaged, and learning from the best. I commend this motion to council.
Right. Thank you very much, Councillor Scott. Any other further submissions from councillors on this one? Okay. In that case, we'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I'm going to declare that carried unanimously. Please invite the Deputy Lord Mayor to return to the chamber. And as she is returning, I will let everybody know that that concludes the reports from management. We move now to agenda item 7, general business. And there is one item of general business this evening, and this is what Ben Herbert and many others have been waiting for. It is the petition. The petition regarding heavy truck traffic in Kensington. And I am going to ask that a motion please be put up on the screen. This is a procedural motion. It notes that we are receiving and noting the petition. We will refer the petition to the Chief Executive Officer for consideration, and we will inform the signatory, the first name signatory to the petition, of our decision to accept it. I'm happy to move that motion. I'm looking for a councillor to second the motion. Thank you, Councillor Camillo. And your interest in this matter, given your role as Deputy in Infrastructure. Given it is a procedural motion, we won't be debating it. So I'll therefore put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Not surprisingly, that's carried unanimously. All right, and just for the record again, thank you, Ben Herbert, for your efforts in getting over 1,000 or close to 1,000 signatures on that petition. Okay, that concludes items of general business. We now move on to agenda item 8, urgent business. I don't believe there are any items of urgent business. So we move on to agenda item 9, public questions. Another 15-minute period will now be provided for members of the public to ask questions. Questions should not be greater than 90 seconds in duration. I do note we still have a number of written questions that we didn't get to at question time at the start of this meeting. We prioritise those who turn up and ask their questions. So before we turn to the written questions that we didn't get to, I'm going to ask a question again. Are there any questions of people who are here with us? B. McNicholas, please make your way to the lectern and fire away with your question.
Thank you. I just wanted to put on the record in relation to a number of comments made by the Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, CEO and various councillors, and Mark with his green this evening. Something to look at, and I'd love you to support ongoing, is to help support with both state government and federal government that we try to get some sort of lottery funding. I used it and worked in London in the 1990s when that was introduced, and it's been radical change for not just heritage places, but parks and gardens, landscape, environment, and things like the bid. And I'd be interested to know how much of that money came from lottery for the bid in London, because certainly the West End and our Collins Street would fit into various heritage categories. And it's unlimited because they waited all that time until they took a percentage out of every lottery. And we in Melbourne know how much money gambling produces. So they learned from us and they take a percentage. It's unlimited funding. I would love for you to help support that. It would help solve a lot of your funding and our funding issues.
All right, thank you, B, for that interesting question. We'll take that one on notice. I'm sure Councillor Owen Guest is always looking for ways to provide relief to ratepayers by any means possible, and a lottery indeed may be one pathway, subject to state legislation that governs that area in this state. Are there any other questions from the public? Aaron Moon, please come forward and fire away.
So my phone and computer died, so I'm kind of winging my question here. So we heard earlier about Lygon Street becoming a bit of a better high street. The last week before that, we heard about Flinders Street becoming a better high street and not putting cars through there. We've heard about Racecourse Road extensively. What we're missing out, though, on is Spencer Street High Street renewal. It's been a long time since that's come to council. Lord Mayor, you would remember as the Deputy Planning portfolio that was last back in 2022. And since we last talked about it here in Town Hall, it's been a very long time, and the Planning Minister has approved the amendment that we were seeking. But really, we've been quite silent on the matter since that good amendment has gone through. So what's happening with the Spencer Street High Street renewal project?
Thanks, Aaron. That's a great question. So the Spencer Street renewal project remains part of our vision for West Melbourne. We want to see Spencer Street be a famous high street of the inner city, up there with Lygon Street, Errol Street, and other high streets that we know and love in our municipality. We are seeing progress with new retail offerings coming on stream along Spencer Street. As new developments are going up, we very closely scrutinise what is happening in terms of street front activation, and we try to work with developers and I'm trying to put this politely, work with them to ensure that we get that fine grain street frontage, that fine grain retail experience, which we know makes streets a hive of activity and makes them attractive for other people to come and visit. And so those projects are working their way along. And we do have a number of projects which are under consideration for this year's budget around West Melbourne in terms of infrastructure works. So we'll have to wait and see whether they meet with support come our budget soon. But thank you for your question and thank you for keeping the spotlight on that part of our city. Cool. Thank you, Aaron. Stan Capp.
Can I ask a writer on that if there's any sense of the timelines we can expect for the Spencer Street North master plan?
Through you, Lord Mayor, thanks for the question, Councillor Dr. Ball. We currently are reviewing the Spencer Street North master plan in-house. There's in line with the requirements of Department of Transport and Planning, there's a request to actually pause any sort of finalisation of any works during the monitoring period. But certainly we are looking at bringing that back to council once we've finalised a review of the Spencer Street North Master Plan.
Can you give us an approximate sense of when that might?
The monitoring period extends until June.
Yes, no, the plan.
Following that, we'll have to confirm a timeline on the plan. I'll come back to councillors on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, over to you, Stan Cap.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question relates to the matter of planning and Plan Victoria that's being rolled out across the state into 50 activity centres and numerous other jurisdictions. One of the contradictions of the community engagement policy is that we don't actually consult with the public about matters of importance to them as stakeholders in proposed developments. And we've done some good work with the Deputy Lord Mayor in terms of pointing us in the direction. I thank her for that. I do wonder, though, in the context of the MAV motions, which I support, whether a fifth motion might not actually be about what is what's the MAV doing about planning across the state, where denying the public the right to have notice of imminent developments is being forfeited. So my question is that something that we as a council would like to pursue, or are there separate things happening that I don't know about that are going to make this suddenly an epiphany for the state government to realise that residents have rights?
That question, Stan. Over to you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thanks for the question, Stan, and thank you and to all of the members of EastEnders for your ongoing engagement and advocacy about this issue. It is incredibly useful for us to have the benefit of your views on community engagement, but on planning issues as well. So I'm very grateful for that. As you may know, the MAV did provide a submission to the state government in the lead up to the introduction of the new planning legislation, which was a significant amount of work. And they were instrumental in some of the amendments that were ultimately accepted by the government when the legislation was passed. They are not relevant to the issues you raise, but to your question of what is MAV doing in the planning space, that is the most recent body of work they have done. On the question of ongoing advocacy in the planning space, I certainly think that the MAV is one body that can do that. Of course, the City of Melbourne also has a very loud microphone. So I'm very happy to continue that ongoing dialogue with you, other residents, members of EastEnders, about some practical solutions to make sure that the people affected by planning decisions are being heard.
All right, thank you, DLM. Are there any other questions from those here? Yep, please come up.
Good evening. My name is Callum. It's regarding two smashed windows. So Stalactites has got a smashed window on its Russell Street. I reckon that's within the last week. And then if you come down on the Burke and Russell intersection, the old Hungry Jack's has got a smashed window, a lot smaller. So my question is, do council cameras cover these areas? And then is it Melbourne City Council's responsibility to prevent windows getting smashed, or is that more a VicPol thing?
Thanks, Callum, for that question. I think we all know the two buildings you're referring to there, and we know the owners of those buildings as well. So we will endeavour to find out what's occurred there and, importantly, get them repaired as quickly as possible. There's nothing worse than seeing a broken window on a high street. It's like a missing tooth in a beautiful smile. And so we need to get them repaired as quickly as possible so those streets can shine.
Get them repaired, sorry, just curiosity, as in Stalactites has to pay, or Melbourne City Council helps pay to get it repaired, or just curious?
So, no, that would be for the property owners to pay for those repairs, and hopefully they've got insurance arrangements in place that would cover that as well. And property damage like that's a criminal offence, so that would involve VicPol, as it absolutely should in both of these cases. In terms of cameras, our cameras operate very extensively across the Hoddle grid. If you walk in the streets of this city, guess what? you're on camera, most likely. And if you're up to no good, you're probably going to get caught. So we will, having noted those two incidents that you have referred to, have a very close look at the footage, and if it shows anything, then that will be shared with Victoria Police, and hopefully that will lead to a prosecution and a very clear lesson being taught to those who are engaging that sort of property damage, that sort of vandalism around our city. Cool. Thanks for the question, Callum. All right. Are there any other questions from those who are here? We might move to the written questions. I'm just checking with David how many minutes we have left. But we will move to the next one, which was on the list, and I'm going to call on Councillor Camillo to read out a written question as Safety and Cleaning Portfolio Lead. Over to you, Councillor Camillo.
What is from Anastasia Beasley? Is a written question. Why have resources been removed from Council's website about the way camera surveillance is used in Melbourne? The privacy impact assessment for the new SCCP policy is missing from the December 2nd meeting record, and the interactive map of camera locations has been replaced by outdated screenshot of the map. The SCCP policy asserts that the audit committee's terms of reference are published on the website, which they aren't. At the December 2 FMC meeting, Rick Wasek said that the corporate CCTV procedure governing body-worn camera footage was available on the website, which it isn't. The $2.3 million spent on SCCP infrastructure was broken into arbitrary chunks: maintenance, renewal, expansion, and upgrade. So the spend is small enough that the procurement decisions can be approved through the CEO rather than the council, and there is no public record of what those four distinct budget lines really mean. For example, is upgrade more expensive than renew because it includes software? Which of the budgets covers public consultation? I have been asking for a bare minimum of transparency for over a year through privacy, governance, FOI, and complaints channels, and these documents are still inaccessible. So I would like to ask Rick Wasek to answer this question, please. He's the director of City Safe. He's the general manager for this area, please.
Thanks, Councillor Camillo. Over to you, Rick.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo, and through you, Lord Mayor. In relation to the questions, I can confirm that the privacy impact assessment was actually attached to the report presented to Council on the 7th of October 2025, and it's still available and accessible on the website. The privacy impact assessment outcome was actually incorporated into the policy and was presented to Council on the 2nd of December. The interactive Safe City camera location map has actually been replaced with a static map that is up to date and provides the most recent information on camera locations, and will be updated as additional cameras are incorporated into the network. The Safe City camera program terms of reference for the audit committee is currently under review, and when complete, it will be available online. The corporate CCTV procedure governing body-worn cameras is not on the Safe City camera area of the website. The community safety officers wear body-worn cameras, which can be referenced on the community safety officer page. The proposed spend on Safe City cameras was included in the proposed operational and capital budgets, which Council noted to go out for public consultation at the 13th of May 2025 Council meeting. Feedback received on the proposed budget was heard at the Future Melbourne Committee at the meeting on the 17th of June 2025, and Council endorsed the budget at Special Council meeting on the 30th of June. The budget for Safe City camera spends are as follows. $1.53 million has been associated with the upgrade of the Safe City camera system and includes service switches and wireless communication links across the network. 540,000 enabled the replacement of 25 cameras at the end of life in 25 locations. 120,000 annual renewal budget is there to replace equipment which is at end of life, and 163,000 annual maintenance budget is associated with maintenance of the network, such as cleaning of cameras and other ad hoc maintenance issues. All the correspondence that Ms Beasley has provided to Council, except for the most recent correspondence, has been responded to, and we'll respond to it accordingly with a formal response. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. Councillor Ball.
I have further questions also for Rick. Thank you. So can you tell us why an interactive map has been replaced with a static map?
We've more recently included additional cameras on the map. It is the new version actually allows it to be upgraded more easily. For whatever reason, the interactive map wasn't reflecting the exact and accurate location of the cameras, so we've actually replaced that with a more accurate plan.
So it's a sort of a technical problem that it couldn't be reflected in.
That's correct. So
but
the current plan on the website includes the current location of the cameras and is more accurate.
Thank you. And Ms Beasley is asking why the body-worn camera footage is available on the website. You said that the body-worn camera footage would be available on the website. I'm not sure I understand whether that's what she means, but I'm interested to know why our body-worn camera policy is not available on the website. You said it's referenced, like the fact that our new CSOs wear body-worn cameras is mentioned on the website, but can we expect to see public policy about governing the use and management of those cameras and the footage?
Currently, there's a section on the website that relates to our city safety officers, and there's a section there that outlines the body-worn cameras and how they're used by the safety officers, and that outlines the procedure and process for the use of those cameras.
Thank you.
All right. Time for questions has expired. There was one final question from Fana Ahmet. That would be coming to you, Councillor Guest. Do you want to deal with it quickly so we can say that we've dealt with every single question that was put
Certainly,
to us
Lord
this
Mayor.
evening? Thank you, Councillor Guest.
We have a question from Fana Ahmet, who I think a lot of us know. She's a passionate advocate for the traders at the Queen Victoria Market. I won't read out the in question verbatim, but I think if I break it down, she's asking for, I'd call it my words, transparency in terms of how the night market is accounted in relationship to the day market. And she also brings forward a question, she talks about the solar panels that went in, so she's clearly interested in how the expenses are accounted for and how the benefits from those solar panels coming through to the day traders. Understandable questions, and in a general sense, I'd say transparency leads to trust. And I think we know there's obviously been a lot of going on here, and we're trying to sort our way through to find a win-win, if you like. Strictly speaking, what I see here is no, the Queen Victoria Market does not account or break out the night market from the day market in terms of its reporting back to the Traders Association. I will ask Mance, he's not here tonight, but he's on the board, as to perhaps that's a development we could make. I'm sure there are pros and cons, but I think that's a fair question. It may be that the benefits are all flowing through, but it's important for all the people who are using the market to know that. I'll take it on trust that there are benefits, but I think that's a question that I'm happy to take forward and bring that back to you all, because I can see. And I will just say, watch this space. Councillor Camillo has been working very hard, and in 2 weeks' time, you'll be hearing a lot more about the Queen Victoria Market. We are trying to make inroads to get questions answered. Not promising the world, just saying that we're looking for answers, and possibly there might be some ways to do things better. And so we're working on that. But in the short, strictly for Whānau, yes, I'll ask that question of Mance. Perhaps there's a better way we can account for that, just to show a little bit more information.
All right, thank you for that, Councillor Guest. And Whānau has a second question as well, which goes to water use. It's quite technical in its nature, so we'll take that question on notice and we'll provide Whānau with a written response, which I know the officers have worked on. All right, that concludes public questions, and that brings us to our final agenda item, which is closure of the open meeting. So can I please thank members of the public for their interest and attendance and declare this council meeting in the best city in the world closed at 8:03 p.m. Thank you, everybody.